Karl Stingl.
And Karl, tell me what unit you served with in the 10th Mountain Division.
I was in I Company when I first got into the service, and I was in I Company on Kiska Island. We came back early from Kiska, and I was with Mountain Training Group in MTG. There were about 150 of us. We all taught skiing then, and then after they broke up MTG, I came to headquarters company, 1st Battalion of the 87th, and with a group of about 5 of us, we formed the S2 section for the 1st Battalion of the 87th.
Now tell me where you immigrated from.
I was born in Czechoslovakia, and I came to this country in 1937, and I was 15 years old.
And were you drafted or did you volunteer?
I couldn't volunteer. I had to be drafted. So the draft age got lowered in 1942 to below 21. Before then, you had to be at least 21 to get into the service.
And when you were drafted, did you have any say in which division you got to fight in?
Oh yes, I volunteered.
To go to the 10th Mountain Division?
Yes, I got 2 letters of recommendation. You were supposed to have 3, but they let me in with 2.
Do you know what was in your 2?
Well, I was pretty good skier at the time, so I had no problems.
Okay. And tell me what your highest rank served was in the 10th.
I was a T5.
Okay. Very good. Karl, I want to start by having you tell me a little bit about your experience on Kiska.
Well, I was a messenger. I was a runner, and so I was. And the thing was that amazed me. We were the attacking company, and about many years later, I found out about the first 40 from I Company. They all were volunteers, and I don't remember ever volunteering, and so. Everything was kind of funny, but anyhow, when we came into the shore, I still remember that real well. The Japanese dugouts were right above us. They could have thrown rocks at us. The Japanese would have stayed up there. Just about all of us, I know we would have been wiped out.
What was it like landing on those landing crafts?
Well, where we came in, it was very, very primitive. It was just rocks all over the place, and we had we couldn't even get with more that we just to get to start. We got one boat in, and while that boat was in the unloading, I had the machine gun on the port side. I had it pointed up in those positions right up above us, and so we were just waiting for things to happen. So it is a real. We had no idea there were no Japs there, so everything was real to us. So once they dropped the raft and we came in, some of them got quite wet. I don't remember really too much about that. I was in a hurry to get up the hill.
Was it cold?
If it wasn't really too cold, it was just miserable. The wind was blowing, and the fog was hanging in there, and the whole mountain looked like it was just a wall right in front of us. And I was a runner, and I had to go from one side we went up a ridge, and I went from one side to the other, and I always told which outfit to move up, to get up which side to go ahead. On our right, I could look over in Quisling Cove, the 2nd Battalion of the 87th, they landed on our right. And when the fog lifted, sometimes I could see some of them moving around over there. It was really eerie.
Tell me about the nature of the action where some of the men in your group were killed.
Well, that night, we get up to the top of the ridge. We landed on the back side of Gertrude Cove. And the main port on the island was Kiska Harbor, that was farther west. But so we were. The plan was for the 2nd and 3rd Battalion to land on the opposite side of Gertrude Cove, and then the 1st Battalion was to land the day following on the back side, on the north side of Kiska Harbor. And so when we got up to the ridge, and up on top of the ridge there, they had the Japanese, they had an outpost, they have the little shack up there. But when they told us that the water was still warm on the stove when they got there. So we always hear stories. But anyhow, that night, we all got settled down. We got dug we dug our holes. It was pretty tricky to dig in because the ground was just like shale, just just small rocks. And for my place, I just sort of dug a ledge out and shoved the rocks up on one side. And then that night, the battalion commander came in during the night, and he didn't like his position, so they changed positions. And then when it started graying up in the mornings, they saw there was somebody was there but wasn't supposed to be there, and they started some shooting. So the battalion CP, they called back to us. I was up in the little hut that was our CP, and we got the call from battalion that the battalion CP had been attacked by the Japanese in large numbers, and to send one platoon of men back to protect the battalion CP. So Dev Jennings, he was my buddy. He was from Salt Lake City. He was in the Olympic team in '48. He was the runner with me, and he went and he got Lieutenant Funk, and he was the platoon leader of the 3rd Battalion. He was a relative of Funk and Wagner dictionary, and he told Lieutenant Funk to go back to protect the battalion CP. And Lieutenant Funk never came back. He got killed on that trip. And then I went out, and I told all of our troops that the battalion CP had been attacked, and to watch for infiltrations. So I went around and told everybody. Then I went to the back of the ridge, and the murder squad back there was back there. I told them, and then I came back over the top and headed back down to my hole. Then all hell broke loose. Everybody opened up on me, I believe. And so I got back down to my hole. I dove into it. By that time, everything they got a little bit lighter, so you could see a little bit more, but the fog was still blowing and was moving through, so it looked like everything was moving. Now, so I got into my hole, and I wasn't going to be cut. I had my head up over the top. I'd never figured any of my own guys would shoot at me. That just was, I could never figure that one out. So I shoved the turret out in front, so my helmet was about even with the top of the ground. Then it finally quieted down. And then in the hole below me, there were two of my friends were in there, and I waved to them, and I thought they waved back to me, but they both were dead. So it was a very spooky night. We had 5 of them killed in my company.
What were you thinking throughout all that?
Well, we were young, and we were fighting a war, and so you never really know what to expect, and nobody's ever heard of friendly fire before.
Did you think you were going to survive?
You never even think about dying. Even later on, you can't think that way. You have to be a mind that's been made up that you're going to make it. You're just better than the rest of them, and that's the way you have to think.
Did you feel like you were pretty lucky?
Well, I was poor lucky.
Well, you were lucky. Tell me a little bit about how your brother fought on the German side and you fought on the Allies' side.
when I left, I was lucky to get out of there. I know I got questioned by the Czechs about why I wanted to leave, and then they wanted. I never forget. One of the questions was, "How come I got an A in math, but I got a C in Czech?" So, but I managed. I passed everything. I got my visa to get out of there. But my brother, my family stayed there. My brother was 4 years younger than I was. Well, when he grew up, he grew into the draft age. The boys that I grew up with, there was, I think just about all of them got killed. There were very few of them left. That year, 1922, they're the ones that went from the start of the war all the way through. So I was a real lucky person to be here.
So you're saying most of the fellows that you grew up with in Europe were drafted by the Germans and then killed?
Yes. They got killed during the war. But they had a terrific casualty rate because, well, like I say, they fought everything. And my brother ended up on the Russian front, and so they had some really rough goings, and then he got wounded in Hungary. Then he went back home to get on furlough, and then the war started to end. Then instead of reporting back to his outfit, he went to the west, and he got picked up by the Americans, and then they set him free, and he went home. I made a trip from Italy after the war was over. I made a trip up into Czechoslovakia. We picked up a motorcycle on a push up through Italy, and I painted we painted the motorcycle olive drab, and I got a pass from it was sort of from the battalion executive officer. Captain Marushek was his name, and I still remember that. And then anyhow, I got the pass to go up into Czechoslovakia, and so I wore my old mountain jacket and ski cap. It was a little bit raining. On that motorcycle, and I went straight through Austria, and I got stopped on every roadblock because and I always had to do a lot of fast talking. So, and then when I was having problems getting gasoline, there was a gasoline shortage, so it was kind of tricky to get gasoline. But anyhow, I made it into my hometown, and my brother was home at the time. My family was still fine, so it was real good. Some people recognized me even before I got to my home. We had some American soldiers staying in our house when I got there.
Did you ever worry during the war that you might actually be fighting against your brother who was fighting for the Germans?
Oh yeah, in Italy I did. I did a lot of looking. I mean, I did a lot. I questioned quite a few prisoners. Then, like, I would see the prisoners coming home by the side of the road as we were moving up. I always looked. I always wondered.
How did it make you feel to know that your brother might be fighting against you?
That's tricky. You can't really think too much about that. Just that's the way life is.
Did you ever feel like you didn't want to pull a trigger because that could be your brother?
No, not really. Because there's the chance of having one of them there is pretty doggone slim.
Tell me a little bit about the action that you remember taking a jeep up Belvedere?
Well, we were stationed in. I was the week before the attack on Belvedere. I was in we spent that whole week in Curciola, so we had quite a bit of activity going on there. And then none of us ever really realized how close the Germans were, right above us. And we had our CP was in a big house right in the middle, and then the church was just there was a little churchyard there. The church was there. Then they had the bell tower. It was right above us, and the bell tower was one of our observation points. And the day before the attack, then we got there was a cheap load of people came in, and one of them, I believe, was General Hayes' son. He was a second lieutenant, and he went up the tower. And John McClellan, a friend of mine, he was in the S2 section with me, and he went up, he was up on the tower already. And John McClellan, he saw a German up above there on the phone. And then he said, he said, they're going to start opening up on us. Let's get out of there. But they were making fun of him because they thought he was joking, but so they left. They went down, and by the time they got down in the churchyard, the first shell came in. Then I watched there when John got hit. He got blasted off the hill. One shell sort of threw him off was sort of a ledge alongside of the tower. Then he was out in the churchyard, and he headed for the church itself. Was a big door was open. He got hit there, right there again. Then I was in the building upstairs. I was upstairs in that building next to it, and the shells were still coming in. And then I heard that one of them. I knew that one wasn't going to miss. It came in right on top of me, and all of a sudden up in the building, all of a sudden it was daylight up there. It was a great big boom, and it was daylight, but I couldn't see a thing. And I was laying there. I went with my mind. I had my hands. I could move my feet. My head was everything was still all right yet. Then I realized I was still okay. The rifle was laying alongside of me. I grabbed the rifle and headed for the cellar. But that was another. There was a wall that was bricked in. A dormer was bricked in. That whole dormer was blown out. So it's just unbelievable. Then that evening, then when they started, when we got some reports in. Yet the patrol came in. Was Bob Parker brought the last patrol down the mountain. Then that night we headed up Belvedere, and I ended up that late at night, where they were short of ammunition. We had to get ammunition up near the top, as far as we could go. I drove the jeep. We had about 3-4 fellas with us. We had a trailer. We loaded it. We had a trailer full of ammunition. We drove up that road as far as we could, where the bridge was blown out. Then what we did, the boys jumped out of the jeep, unhitched the trailer. I turned the jeep around. By the time I had the jeep turned around, they hooked the trailer back up. The trailer was empty, and we headed back down. And then that was the last trip anybody made up that road in one piece. After that, anything that went up blew sky high. They ended up. A tank went up, and then they tried some trucks up there, and they blew up. Then they had the bridge truck up for the new bridge, and that one blew sky high. Then they finally ended up with bangular torpedoes clearing the road, and yet I made that trip up, and No problem. The ground was still frozen, or maybe we just didn't quite go in the right places, but we made it.
Wow. Yes, another case of good luck.
Good luck.
Wow. Well, tell me about the experience that led up to you being wounded or injured.
Well, it was in Castellano. It was when we first headed into Castellano. In fact, they held up. The first battalion of the 87th was attacking outfit to take Castellano, and we got held up. We were short of everything. We had batteries and for our communication. Wires did never last at all because they got blown out. So we needed batteries. So I got the Jeep. There was one intersection where the Germans trapped a shell in about every minute. So you had to time it, wait till the shell goes in, then you drive through the intersection as fast as you could. And then I went back. I found a dump where I could get batteries. Then I headed back up towards Castellano. Got back through that intersection. Then when I get up to the first, we were just on the edge of the lower side of Castellano, and it was everything is like ledges over there, and we got in I wasn't the driver then. We had a Jeep driver with us, and we found B Company. I got the batteries to B Company. Then I had the supply sergeant from A Company, Alex Blumenfeld. Alex was from Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. I got a call from him about 3-4 years ago, and we talked about it, and I thanked him again. He saved my life that night. And he was in a Jeep with me. And then we headed back for his company, and then all of a sudden the Jeep just tipped over. And there were 3 of us in the front seat. The driver, I was in the middle, and Blumenfeld was on the right side. When I sat on the ground with the helmet in my lap, and my face was in the helmet. And all the weight of the Jeep was on me. I was doubled over. And so I couldn't, I used all the strength I had to force against the Jeep. And Alex, he was thrown clear. He lifted on the edge on the upper side, and the Jeep driver, he broke his upper arm, and he threw him clear. Then we hollered for help. We were right in the company areas. They had the boys were there, the foxholes right in there. So some people came out. They lifted up, and they kept me out from under there. So I pulled all the muscles in my back, and I couldn't move. So they got the 8 men. They put me on the stretcher, but the shells were coming in so thick at the time. The 8 men just left me sitting there. And I was on the stretcher, might be 3-4 inches off the ground, but that was too high for me. I managed to crawl off that stretcher, to roll off the stretcher somehow, because I wanted to be closer on the ground. So some of those things don't seem very much, but it's quite amazing the things you can do. Then finally they got me on the stretcher. Then finally they got me back on the stretcher and hauled me in the aid station. We had a direct hit on the aid station that night. All of a sudden, all the blankets blew in. They had blankets all over the windows with just candle lights. This all happened at night. It wasn't in the daytime.
Wow, the aid station wasn't really a safe place to be, was it?
No, it's...
What were you thinking when you were lying on that stretcher out by the Jeep and all the shells were coming in on you?
Well, you want to get as close down to the ground as you can, or maybe even underground, because anything that's above ground is in danger of getting hit.
So was this it for you in the war?
Well, from then, but they get me back from that aid station to another aid station, and we always figure, well, if we go so far back, it takes so long to get back up again. Then I ended up in Pistoia, in the hospital there, and then from Pistoia I went back to Leghorn. I was in the hospital in Leghorn, and then from Leghorn I came after I was so long. They had me all taped up for about 3 weeks. For my had a broken shoulder blade. Then I headed back up to the outfit. We went to Pisa, to the rehabilitation center, and from there, by the time we ended up going back up, the war ended then. And when I came back up, they were up on the upper side of Lake Garda.
Did you go up to the border area where Marshal Tito's troops were?
Yes, I sure was. I was stationed in Povec, and it was an army. It was a garrison building. It was a great big building in there, and I spoke pretty good Czech at the time, and so with my Czech, I could make myself understood with the Slovenians.
What sort of things did you talk about with them?
Well, not too much. We had those young guards. They might have been about 12 years old, and they had rifles. They were walking around our compound there with the rifles just about dragging on the ground. And it was quite an amazing deal there, and we did quite a bit of. I was sort of in charge of getting skiing equipment and climbing equipment together, and I had a Jeep. There was another friend of mine, Heinz Youngster. He spoke German. The two of us, we went out then looking for stuff.
Did you guys feel nervous having your opponents dragging these guns around, and they were age 12?
So you never quite know what in the world they're going to do, and.
Did it seem sort of tense at times, like anything could happen?
Well, they gave us ammunition again, and so we sort of, by that time, most of us were a little bit more adjusted to it. We weren't really too. We were pretty cool by then.
Did you have any sense that that this could be the beginning of yet another confrontation?
Well, Tito was going to go in and take that section over, and I think he would have if we wouldn't have moved in, but so we went into that area then, and we went. The section I was in, it was still Italy at that time, but they gave that to which is to Yugoslavia at the time, which is Croatia now, and then most of the people that were around, they were real nice people. They were friendly, so it was just some of the younger guys that were there at the time. We never ran into any older or so-called, what I would figure, people that would have given them orders. We never saw any of those people.
So were these people perhaps partisans?
They might have been, but I don't really. It's awfully hard to tell. But for those youngsters to have rifles, that just didn't seem right at all. And then you never quite know what they could do. So,
was it difficult to know at this point of the war, who the enemies were, or what faction they represent?
It was at that time Yugoslavia with Tito in there. They were fighting the Germans all the way through the war. They had so they were pretty well. We were pretty sure at that time that they were more or less on our side. So it was just a matter of protecting the areas on that they wanted to establish for what they would do after the war.
At this point, let's talk a little bit about D series at Camp Hale.
Well, at Camp Hale during the D series, I was with the S2 section of the 3rd Battalion, and so when we were the enemy detail at that time for the division, and so we were over at Vail Pass, and we were so when they blew the whistle to start the fight, so we were the first guys, and I was mostly pretty well up in front. Then we went from Vail over, and we got up to above Ptarmigan Ridge, and then where Resolution Creek goes up, that whole ridge there, we were along the top of that ridge there. And so all the boys when they came up from Camp Hale, whenever they came up, we picked them up off on top. And so we made the division look awfully silly. So we picked up and so the account of us doing that, they kept the D series going for about a week or too long, so they finally had to fight to win at the end. But I made a trip that night. I still remember that well. I skied down into camp, and I could smell the bakery, and I smelled bread, and so there was no way to keep me out of the place. And so I went in there, and then the boys gave me a loaf of bread, and that loaf of bread was just soft, was not very much to it. I just ate that loaf of bread, and then they told me they had some lunch meat in there. And so then I got some other boys, I Company of the 87th. I had some of the boys from I Company with me, and I found them, and I brought them down to the bakeries. And then I headed back up the mountain. Then before it got light, I left my skis up the hill. I picked up my skis and headed back up and headed back down the other side. I remember Easter Sunday. We were on the other side of Vail Pass and on the other side of the highway, and the weather was miserable. It was snowing. It was blizzard. And everything was supposed to be tactical, but we were so far away up there, so we just built a good fire up there, and we felt pretty secure then. But then finally we ended up down in Eagle, and we had to all be shaved before we got back to camp, and I don't think anybody really had any razors, so we had to probably one blade had to go a long ways.
Were there times during D series where you guys, as the bad guys, were ambushed and overrun by the other team?
No, never.
Never?
No. I was a runner at that time too. I always got around, like I brought Captain Wilson, or Colonel Wilson was our battalion commander. And I remember when I brought things into him, then was time for me to bed to crawl in the bed. I just put my skis upside down, roll a sleeping bag out on top of that, and crawl in. So it's amazing what he can do.
Were you tired?
I don't think I ever got tired then.
Had you been awake for a long time?
Oh yes, you don't think about those things.
How long had you been awake for?
It's hard to tell. We were going pretty steady. Yet,
Now, how did the good guys, and the good guys were the red team?
but I think we were the red team.
You were the red team.
Yes.
Okay. Now tell me, how did the blue team ever win then, if you guys never lost?
Well, they just had more people, and then the empires had to say who won.
But you can't remember ever being ambushed or.
No, they never got us. We always were on top, and we had, like in the S2 section at that time, we all were from the 87th, and we all were teaching skiing. Then we all got around in the stuff pretty doggone well.
How did being in the 10th Mountain Division shape who you became later in life?
Well, those 3 years I put in the army, they're probably the most important 3 years of my life. I made so many good friends, and later on, I competed for quite a few years in competition, and I had like Steve Knowlton, Dev Jennings. They were all. Pete Seibert was my roommate in Aspen, and we all were real close buddies. And you don't meet people like that in everyday life.
Did you feel like you were a part of something that was really important?
It meant, like, I coached the ski team at the University of Washington for many years, and we had ski coaches at Walt Braga was at Dartmouth, Ralph Townsend was at Williams College, we have Bob Becklager was Montana State. We had so many ski coaches, and college-wise, we all were in the 10th Mountain Division. So and then, like, I'm from Seattle, yet I could go back east. I could go any place in the country, and I would know people.
Did you feel during the war that you were a part of a division that was very extraordinary?
Oh yes.
Why?
We had terrific people in the outfit, real good people, and there's just no. There is no way in the world they will ever get a group like that together. At that time, skiing wasn't like what skiing is now, because to be a skier at that time, you had to sacrifice something. Nothing was really given to you, and if you wanted to go up the hill, you had to work for it. You didn't have a high-speed quad waiting for you. It was a completely different ball game, and so they all had a different outlook on life. It was and the way, and with the group, that the way they were together, it is just hard to describe.
How do you describe what the spirit of the 10th is?
Well, it's a terrific feeling, like to be a part of a unit like that. It's this is, well, like I can tell other people that it was so important in my life. Those 3 years were so important in my life, but they can never realize they can never feature anything like that because they never gone through a setup like that. And then, like when they get into the war zone, you trust your buddies, you rely so much on them, and they back you up, and you back them up.
Is there anything else that you want to say?
Well, I'm just want to say I'm doggone lucky to be still to be here. And it was I've skied. I tried to make a living skiing all my life. I have four youngsters. They all turned out to be doggone good skiers, and they all real good people. That's what life's all about.
Very good. That was wonderful.